Hi there, my name's Steve Sutcliffe and welcome to another comparison test with Tyre Seeker. So in this test we've got 5 mid-range touring tyres and this BMW 118 to test them on. We're at Myra, the conditions are typically UK, typically changeable. So let me tell you a little bit more specifically about the tyres themselves.
From Firestone, we're testing the Roadhawk 2. From GT Radial, we've got the Sport Active 2. From Hankook, we're testing the Ventus Prime 4. From Kormoran, we're trying the UHP for the first time. And from Yokohama, we're testing the Advan Sport V107. As usual, we sourced all our tyres from an independent retailer to ensure total neutrality. And as you can see, our test car is a BMW 118 with a tyre size of 225/45/17. The ambient temperature ranged between 15 and 19 degrees C for our tests, so typical for a UK spring summer. Right then, wet track first, let's get going.
There are no great surprises in this group in the wet, except perhaps for how very good indeed the Firestone is. It's a really sharp tyre in the wet, even compared with the Yokohama and even compared with the GT Radial and the Hankook. It's miles better than the Kormoran in the wet. The Kormoran is the only one that I've got a bit of a question mark about. It definitely makes this BMW 1 Series feel a little bit edgy, to be honest. It definitely doesn't steer as nicely with the Kormorans on either, and it's just slower. Next up from that is the GT Radial and the Hankook, and it's weird, they're very difficult to separate, these two tyres. They do very similar things in a very similar way. I think I prefer the subjective feel just about of the GT Radial over the Hankook, and it is a little bit quicker against the clock. There's just a really lovely, solid, leanable on quality to the GT Radial that the Hankook doesn't quite have. But quantifiably above those two is the Yokohama. Now, Yokohamas haven't always done that well in the wet, but this one is really good on this BMW 1 Series on a wet track. It's got more grip everywhere than the GT Radial and the Hankook. You could simply carry more speed through any corner when you're on the Yoko. And I've just got more faith in the brakes. The anti-lock doesn't come in as soon on a wet track, and the steering just feels a little bit sharper. And it rides really nicely, the Yokohama too. Strong tyre as the Yokohama, but the best of them all, for me, and according to the data, so there's kind of no arguing with it, is the Firestone, which is just a belting mid-range touring tyre. In fact, it's so good, I'm not even sure it should be in this category, to be honest. I think it should be in the premium group. It's doing similar times to the Full Beans premium tyres, and it just has a lovely feel. Kind of solid in its responses and through the steering, and the way it makes the car just feel nice and faithful and neutral when it's really loaded up in a corner. But just the basic fundamental ride comfort also is excellent on the Firestone. So it feels really secure, it's really quick against the clock, it's dead comfortable, and it's the quietest of all the group as well.
So that's a clear result for the Firestone in the wet. But before we talk about the dry tests, here's a bit about our sponsors at eTyres.
So our sponsors at eTyres are basically great, and that's not just because they give us the money to make these videos and have fun at test tracks and decide which tyres are good and which tyres are not good. They're great because they sell tyres at the best prices that you will find anywhere on the internet, and they don't care, there's no bias, they don't care who wins or loses or doesn't do very well in our group tests, because they sell all the tyres in all our tests. You get the best prices that you will find for any tyres anywhere on the internet, pretty much guaranteed. So check them out, etyres.co.uk. Right, back to the tyre testing.
So then we tested our mid-rangers on the dry handling track, and just as we'd found in the wet, only more so, the Yokohama and Firestone shone the brightest. The Yokohama was fast and secure, with great feel in the quick corners, excellent turning response in the slow ones, lots of feel under load and impressive levels of comfort and security. It made the 1 Series feel really sharp during a big direction change too. The Hankook was also pretty good everywhere in the dry. It was quick enough outright and had no sharp edges to its performance near the limit. It also performed well enough under brakes and during direction shifts without quite matching the speed, grip or outright feel of the Firestone and Yokohama overall. It was the same for the GT Radial. You lose a bit of steering bite compared with the Firestone, and the GT doesn't have quite the same grip as the Yokohama on or near the limit. But overall, it's a strong mid-range tyre in the dry, is the GT Radial, one we'd highly recommend. The Kormoran UHP, on the other hand, was definitely the weakest performer of the group. In the dry, it wasn't just slower than the other tyres, it also lacked feel and precision and was not as strong under brakes. Best of all though, was the Firestone, which made the 1 Series come alive around the dry track, just as it had in the wet. It wasn't just the fastest tyre around the lap, but was also the most secure feeling of the group. Simple as that. In all our tests, wet or dry, the Firestone and Yokohama came out top, as you can clearly see, with the GT Radial and Hankook very much occupying the middle ground statistically, while the Kormoran struggled to compete. In the wet tests especially, it was well behind the more established mid-range brands, while at the top, the Firestone was king of the data tests. It's a clear-cut win for the Firestone Roadhawk in the end then, with an equally definitive second place going to the excellent Yokohama. Next up, and pretty hard to separate, are the Hankook and GT Radial, both of which are good tyres, with the Kormoran UHP, while failing to get our full recommendation overall, but still being worth a look if you're on a budget. The best tyre here though is the Firestone, which is a belter, simple as that.
Cheers for watching. Remember to subscribe if you like this video, and see you next time.